Time for our weekly Tigers report with Denny McLain, brought to you by In Play magazine. And Denny, we're heading into a tough part of the season right now. As Matt mentioned this morning, the season starts now.
Well, it certainly does. I mean, they've been playing all year to try to screw this thing up, and the bottom line is, listen, Minnesota just completed a 3-game sweep over Cleveland, as everybody knows. I think they've won 4 in a row now. This is it. But here's something about this is it. I find it very interesting that Jim Leland, our manager of the Tigers, made a statement that, listen, it's real easy. You either win or you don't. I mean, that kind of a tone. And I'm thinking, only a man who signed a new contract for about $8 million this year would say something like that. Because if his job was on the line, he would certainly be talking about this series in a much bigger and more important way. It's going to be a big one. Listen, you got Jackson. We've talked about Jackson before, and we've always thought that he was kind of living in a bubble, and we knew sooner or later that bubble was going to pop. His numbers since, I don't know when it was, since the All-Star break are way up, and he hasn't really got anybody out. He has his moments, a couple of innings in a row when he looks like Cy Young in his prime, but most of the time he looks like his wife. And then as far as Porcello, they haven't let this kid pitch yet. And I suggest to you that what's going to happen here in the playoffs is they're going to all of a sudden let this kid pitch more than 100 pitches, Mr. 100 pitches, and I don't know what we'll find out. Hopefully we find out good things. Because, man, I want to tell you, this Porcello has been the most impressive. They all talk about Verlander. They talk about his stuff and everything else. But who's been more consistent than Porcello? He's day in and day out, Porcello's been more consistent than Verlander. Now, Verlander, of course, is more of a sensational-type pitcher. He can go out there and strike out 10, 12, 14 every time he goes out there with the kind of stuff he does. But then he has a brain fart and gives up 5 runs in 1 inning. So, and that's a lack of concentration, guys. That's all that.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about Jim Leland briefly. Earlier today. I've made it clear for the last year or so, I'm not a fan of Jim Leland. I don't like him being the manager of the Tigers right now. He did some amazing things a couple of years ago, but he's really starting to wear on me. Number one, as you mentioned, is the lineup, because he seems to think that when the Tigers lose a couple of games, if he moves a couple of guys in and out of the lineup, that it's going to change. But he takes, he'll take Mags out for Cleet Thomas. And Cleet is a good ball player, and I like Cleet. But if you need base hits and you're struggling to get base hits, Maglio has proven that he can hit at this level where Cleet hasn't. Yep. The other thing about Jimmy is, right off the top, you mentioned the comment that he made that you either win or lose. Right. I'd like to see Jimmy Leland get a little angry at these guys, because everybody's been saying for the last month, if the Tigers play 500, they'll make it. Minnesota has to go 19-6 or whatever the numbers have been. But this team hasn't even played 500 in this month, and he just seems to have his feet up, just say, oh, well, we lost today, tomorrow we'll go get them.
Yeah, it's not. I remember when I played, and we would suffer some of these devastating streaks. You'd lose 3 in a row, 5 in a row, 6 in a row. I mean, the manager would get in somebody's butt, and I mean really in a serious way, even demonstrations on the bench once in a while. Listen, why was Billy Martin so successful as a manager? Because he got in players' butts when they weren't doing their thing. And it's not that they're not doing their thing. Fundamentally, the game has suffered over the years. But with the type of ability they have with some of these guys, listen, we don't have many kids in this starting lineup. We don't have many. We got guys who are supposed to be able to play the game, guys who are supposed to be able to score a run. And I don't quite understand. Mags can be the DH for the rest of... Listen, I think Mags can hit for another 10 years if you make him a DH. Somebody may have to run for him after first base, but nonetheless, he can hit. God put him on the earth to hit. And pulling him out yesterday, pulling some of the other guys out, just don't get it. And as a matter of fact, let me take it one step further. At this point in time in the season, because we can't score any runs, I'll take the guy at third base, Inge. I'd put him behind home plate. I know he's got a bad knee, and he's going to have to let you do that. But I'd put him behind home plate because he hits, I hate to use the word a lot, but he's a much better hitter than Laird. And then put whoever you want to put at third base, but somebody who can swing the bat. Now, I know they're not going to think about doing that, but you need as many bats in the lineup. You need as many opportunities to hit the ball out of the ballpark. And, by the way, this is one of the great hitters' parks in all of the world. This is a bandbox. this is better than Minnesota or Boston used to be in the days when guys were mashing that wall in Boston. This is one of the great hitters' parks, and the Tigers, of course, have never played well in Minnesota. But this is going to be huge. If they lose 2 out of 3 here, at least 2 out of 3, boy, they got to really look over their shoulders pretty quick. The only thing they can thank the good Lord for is that everybody has sucked all season long. Everybody has been hurt all season long, and they've still got a shot at it. And Verlander, listen, man, it's time for him to step up and do what he's supposed to do now. This is the time of the year when now he's not making that big money, although when he gets a new contract, you can just take this to the bank. Heck, this guy's going to get a $60, $80, $90 million contract here in the next year or two. But it's time for him to step up and do what he's supposed to do, too.
Yeah, in 2006, it was kind of funny when the Tigers were making their run. You'd get to the point where they'd be trailing 3-0 or something like that, and you'd be sitting back and thinking, oh, okay, they can come back from this. But now,
hitting the ball out of the ballpark.
Want to touch on something that happened at Comerica Park on Wednesday night. We played the audio, and boy, oh boy, not a dry eye in the house when you listen to the magic pipes of Ernie Harwell. Before we let you go, thoughts on the man?
Not to throw names around, but my wife and I are going to have lunch with Ernie next week. And,
wow, cool.
It's going to be, going to be a tough moment for us. I mean, he's been a part of my life for 50 years, and he's the most gracious, most sincere. You know, a lot of people don't believe that he is as sincere as he appears to be, that he's as nice as he appears to be. I've known him 50 years, and you can't say this about anybody else in your life, I don't think. Maybe your mother. But the bottom line is, I've never heard him say a bad word about anybody. I've never heard him raise his anger. I've never heard him get mad at anybody. The guy has just lived in this box, as I've always told him, and nothing bothers him. And I'm sure plenty of things bother him. We all have family issues as we go through life, sure. and certainly Ernie's family has had theirs. But the bottom line, hey, the guy is what he appears to be. We're going to miss him, and I just don't think that... I could be wrong, but I don't think he wants all of this big-time send-off that he's getting. Yeah. I think he's being talked into it by people who represent him, and I would hope that they would just let him rest and do what he wants to do rather than having to appear at all these events. Because, hey, listen, this is making all these appearances takes a lot of energy out of you, and we don't necessarily want Ernie to leave, like they say, in 6 months. You know, maybe he hangs around another couple of years. I mean, that would be great just to see him, because he's just... I'm telling you, the guy is next to sainthood. And I don't think he can qualify for sainthood because he's not a Catholic.
You know, when you hear his voice the other night, if you didn't know he was sick, and you didn't even know, if you didn't know who the man was, just listen to the voice. He's still got the pipes. You would never think he was a man in his 90s. Man, oh man, the voice is still booming. He could have hopped into that play-by-play box and taken over that game immediately. He still sounds amazing. We
would have all been better off had he been doing the play-by-play also. And one last thing about Ernie. When Ernie was, you know, when we didn't have a lot of TV back in the 60s, early 70s, until the game really became a television product all the time, Ernie, when you heard him on the radio at night, it was like a sense of security. Everything was fine in the world. Mm-hmm. And there aren't many people that can speak in that way, and you get that kind of a feeling. But Ernie certainly extended that.
So what time should we be over for lunch with you and Ernie, Denny?
That's going to be a good time. Hopefully Lou will be there and everybody else too. And because there's one, you know, Ernie wrote a song about me.
Oh, did he?
Denny McLain will never be any like Denny McLain. And I sold, as a matter of fact, he sold a lot of records with it. And I don't think he made any money with it because the way the record company set up the sales, you got to sell $18 billion before you get your first check for a nickel. But that song has followed me around all of my life, at least in Detroit. And it was a nice tribute. He wrote it in '68, and we had a great deal of fun with it. And, he's written, I don't know if you guys know, he's probably written 2,000-3,000 songs.
Yeah, well, he wrote one about Hank Aaron, didn't he?
Yeah, listen, he one thing about Ernie, he's very creative. You don't look at Ernie and assume so, but he's a very creative guy, and he loves his music, and we'll all miss him.
Well, on that note, Denny, we'll let you go. Thank you so much. Always a privilege to have you on the radio, and we'll have to see if we can dig up that song for next week when you're with us.
I keep waiting for an invitation to breakfast, but I guess it's not coming, huh?
No, anytime, Denny. We're going to send a car for you. Whatever you need, Denny.
Card. My God. Oh, mine. Make sure it's big enough I can get in it.
You're a good man. Denny McLain, thank you so much.
Have a good weekend, guys. Thanks.
You too, pal. It's the Tigers Report, brought to you by In Play Magazine.
Their website, again, is inplaymagazine.com.